Everyone feared the millionaire's wife, not because of her wealth alone, but because of the quiet cruelty she carried like a weapon. For 10 long years, Victoria Ashford had ruled the lives of others with a single glance, a soft word, or a calculated complaint. People whispered her name the way others whispered curses. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her power came from knowing exactly how to destroy someone without ever getting her hands dirty. This was not a rumor or exaggeration. It was a pattern. Staff members at London's most elite restaurant, the Golden Rose, had learned to recognize the sound of her arrival before they even saw her. Every Friday night at exactly 8 o'clock, the doors would open and the air itself seemed to tighten. Conversations lowered, smiles disappeared, hands began to tremble. Because when Victoria Ashford entered the room, someone's night, and sometimes their entire future, was about to be ruined. The Golden Rose was a place built for the powerful. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. Silverware was polished to a mirror shine. A single meal cost more than many people earned in a month. Politicians, billionaires, and celebrities dined here not just for the food, but for the feeling of superiority it offered. And Victoria Ashford fit perfectly into that world. She always sat in the same corner booth, always dressed in designer gowns, diamonds catching the light like small, sharp stars. She didn't come to enjoy dinner, she came to be feared. The staff knew her history all too well. There was Thomas, a young waiter saving money for university. His mistake? Standing too close to her table while serving another guest. Victoria claimed his presence contaminated her experience. He was fired before dessert arrived. She watched him remove his uniform, watched his hands shake, watched tears fill his eyes. And according to those who were there, she smiled. Not loudly, not cruelly. Just enough to let him know she enjoyed it. This was the world Rachel Bennett stepped into without fully understanding what awaited her. Rachel was 32 years old, intelligent, observant, and exhausted in a way only people who have lost everything too quickly can understand. Just 3 months earlier, she had been working as a research assistant for one of London's most respected investigative journalists. She loved that job. She was good at it. Finding hidden connections, uncovering secrets, asking questions no one else dared to ask. It was who she was, until budget cuts ended everything. Now she stood inside the Golden Rose wearing a stiff waitress uniform, adjusting a collar that didn't feel like hers, memorizing rules that had nothing to do with truth or justice. This job wasn't a choice, it was survival. Rent didn't wait. Bills didn't care about broken dreams. She told herself this was temporary, just a pause, just until she found her way back, on her. Very first day, an older waiter named George pulled her aside. His face carried the quiet defeat of someone who had seen too much and learned to stay silent. He pointed discreetly toward the corner booth and lowered his voice. "That's where she sits," he said. "Victoria Ashford, wife of Lawrence Ashford, the billionaire." Rachel nodded. Everyone knew Lawrence Ashford. His companies dominated headlines. "One wrong move," George continued, "and she'll have you fired. Not just fired, finished." Rachel felt a knot form in her stomach. She had dealt with difficult people before, powerful people even, but something about the way George spoke told her this was different. This wasn't just arrogance. This was cruelty turned into a habit. When Victoria finally arrived that night, Rachel understood immediately. The room changed. Victoria's eyes scanned the space slowly, cold and calculating, as if she were deciding who deserved to exist and who didn't. Rachel was assigned to work nearby, close enough to hear Victoria's complaints, close enough to see how her husband, Lawrence Ashford, sat beside her like a shadow, wealthy, respected, and completely defeated. Victoria sent back her wine, complained about the lighting, insulted the staff with polite words sharpened like knives. And as Rachel watched, something stirred inside her. Not fear, not anger, recognition. Rachel had spent years uncovering secrets, and standing there, watching Victoria Ashford control an entire room without raising her voice, Rachel realized something important. People like this always had secrets, and secrets, no matter how deeply buried, always found a way to surface. And that realization would change everything. Rachel tried to tell herself that she was imagining things, that the tightness in her chest was just first-day nerves. But the more time she spent moving between tables, the more she realized that Victoria Ashford didn't simply complain, she hunted. Every word she spoke was designed to test the staff, to see who would crack first. A misplaced fork, a pause that lasted half a second too long, a glass filled 1 inch lower than she preferred, each was treated like a personal insult. What unsettled Rachel most wasn't the anger, it was the enjoyment. Victoria's lips would curve into the faintest smile whenever someone apologized too quickly, whenever a waiter's hands shook, whenever a manager rushed over in panic. Power, Rachel understood, was addictive, and Victoria was deeply addicted. Rachel's investigative instincts, dormant but not dead, began to awaken. She watched carefully, pretending to focus on her tasks while mentally recording every interaction. She noticed how Victoria never yelled in public. She used calm, controlled disappointment instead. That way, she never looked unreasonable. The staff looked incompetent. It was a tactic Rachel had seen before in powerful figures who knew how to destroy reputations without leaving fingerprints. At one point, Victoria's husband, Lawrence Ashford, tried to intervene. "That's enough, Victoria," he said quietly, when she criticized a young hostess for breathing too loudly. The room went still. Victoria turned her icy gaze on him, and something dark flickered behind her eyes. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She simply smiled and said, "Don't embarrass me in public." Lawrence fell silent immediately. The billionaire who controlled empires couldn't even defend a stranger from his own wife. Rachel felt something twist inside her. This wasn't just cruelty. It was control, total, suffocating control. Later that evening, George passed Rachel in the service hallway. "Keep your head down," he whispered. "People who notice things don't last long here." Rachel nodded, but she already knew she couldn't unsee what she had seen. Years of investigative work had trained her to recognize patterns, and Victoria Ashford was a pattern waiting to be broken. As the night went on, Rachel was sent to refill water near Victoria's table. Her heart pounded, but she kept her movements steady. Victoria barely acknowledged her, but Rachel caught something unusual. A subtle shift in posture when certain topics came up, a sharp glance whenever Lawrence mentioned business associates, and then, something far more interesting, Victoria's reaction when a name was mentioned at a nearby table. A guest at the next booth laughed and said, "The Ashford Foundation has been under quiet review lately." It was said casually, without accusation. But Victoria stiffened, just for a second. Her fingers tightened around her wine glass, and the smile she wore froze unnaturally before returning. Rachel almost missed it. Almost, but not quite. That single moment sent a chill through her. Rachel had seen this reaction before in people who feared exposure, the kind of people who believed their public image made them untouchable, the kind who relied on intimidation to keep questions from being asked. Suddenly, Victoria's behavior made sense, in a way that was far more disturbing than simple arrogance. Later in the staff room, Rachel quietly asked George about the Ashford Foundation. His expression changed immediately. "You don't want to ask about that," he said sharply. "People who do tend to disappear from social circles. Careers end, lives get messy." He paused, then added in a lower voice, "Victoria handles most of it. That's all anyone knows." Rachel lay awake that night replaying every detail, the way Victoria controlled the room, the way Lawrence avoided eye contact, the fear in the staff. And that moment, brief but unmistakable, when Victoria's composure cracked. Rachel had lost everything already, her career, her stability, her sense of direction, which meant something dangerous. She had nothing left to lose. And when someone like Victoria Ashford meets someone like Rachel Bennett, someone who understands secrets, patterns, and truth, the balance of power begins to shift, quietly, slowly, invisibly. Victoria still believed she was untouchable. She had no idea she had just been seen. The next Friday, Rachel arrived at the Golden Rose earlier than usual, not because she was eager to serve, but because she needed time to think. The restaurant was quiet, the chandeliers still dim, the tables perfectly aligned like soldiers awaiting inspection. It was in this silence that Rachel's mind worked best. She replayed every word she'd overheard, every glance she'd caught, every reaction that didn't match the situation. Victoria Ashford was meticulous, too meticulous. And people like that didn't fear nothing. They feared exposure. Rachel started small, very small. She began listening more than speaking, positioning herself near conversations without appearing to do so. Wealthy patrons often forgot that waitresses existed. To them, Rachel was furniture, useful, silent, invisible. And invisibility was the greatest advantage an investigator could have. She learned that the Ashford Foundation, praised publicly for its philanthropy, rarely appeared in transparent financial audits. Donations flowed in, but details flowed out slowly, carefully curated. One guest joked that the foundation was a black hole with a press team. Everyone laughed. Victoria did not. Her eyes snapped toward the sound, sharp and warning. The laughter died instantly. Rachel noticed something else, too. Whenever Victoria visited the restaurant, she always requested the same wine, from the same year, served in the same glass. Control, routine, predictability. It wasn't preference, it was armor. And armor meant vulnerability underneath. One evening, a young server named Emily made a mistake. She placed a bread basket on Victoria's table before the wine had been poured. It was minor, barely noticeable. But Victoria's expression hardened instantly. "Do you train your staff at all?" she asked, her voice soft enough to sound polite, loud enough to humiliate. Emily's face drained of color. She stammered an apology, her hands trembling. Rachel watched as the manager rushed over, already apologizing, already preparing to sacrifice another employee to protect the restaurant's reputation. Emily's eyes filled with tears. It was the same pattern, always the same ending. But this time, something inside Rachel snapped. Not anger, not rage, clarity. She stepped forward calmly, her voice steady. "My fault," she said. The room stilled. "I asked Emily to bring the bread early because the kitchen delayed the wine. I should have communicated better." Victoria turned her gaze on Rachel slowly, like a predator noticing movement. The silence stretched. "And who are you?" Victoria asked. "Rachel," she replied simply. No apology, no fear. For a brief moment, Victoria studied her. Rachel felt it, the pressure, the unspoken threat, the silent calculation. Then Victoria smiled. "Be more careful," she said lightly. "Mistakes have consequences." Rachel nodded. "Of course." It was a small moment, insignificant on the surface, but Rachel saw it clearly now. Victoria didn't enjoy punishment unless it was public, and she didn't like being denied a victim. That night, Rachel did something she hadn't done in months. She opened her old laptop, the one she'd used back when journalism had been her life, the one filled with tools, bookmarks, and habits she never thought she'd need again. She didn't search for Victoria Ashford. That would have been too obvious. She searched for people who had once worked for the Ashford Foundation. What she found unsettled her. former employees who had vanished from public records, careers that ended abruptly, non-disclosure agreements filed under unusual conditions, and one name that appeared repeatedly, always followed by silence. A woman who had once attempted to raise concerns, then withdrew her statement and moved overseas within weeks. Rachel closed the laptop slowly, her heartbeat loud in her ears. This wasn't just about a cruel billionaire's wife. This was about a system built on fear. And Victoria Ashford was standing at its center, smiling as long as no one dared to speak. Rachel looked at her reflection in the dark screen. She knew the danger now. She also knew something else. People like Victoria believed power protected them. They never expected it to come from someone they thought was nothing. Rachel didn't rush. She knew better than that. People like Victoria Ashford weren't taken down by emotion or confrontation. They were undone by patience, by patterns, by letting them believe they were untouchable while quietly documenting every crack in their empire. Over the next 2 weeks, Rachel became a shadow inside the Golden Rose. She learned the rhythm of the restaurant, the nights Victoria preferred, the exact time she arrived and left, even the staff members Victoria targeted most often. It was always the same type, young, nervous, needing the job, people who wouldn't fight back, people who could be erased with a single complaint. Rachel began keeping a journal, nothing obvious, no names written plainly, just timestamps, descriptions, words spoken exactly as they were said. She wrote down the way Victoria's smile never reached her eyes, the way Lawrence Ashford avoided eye contact when his wife humiliated someone, the way managers bent instantly without question. Then something unexpected happened. One night, as Rachel was clearing plates near the private hallway that led to the VIP rooms, she overheard raised voices. Victoria's voice was sharp, angry, very unlike her public composure. Rachel paused, pretending to adjust a tray. "You promised me this would disappear," Victoria hissed. "It did," a male voice replied nervously. "Legally, at least, there's nothing left that can touch you." A pause. Then Victoria laughed softly, dangerously. "Nothing stays buried forever." Rachel's breath caught. She memorized every word, every tone. When she returned to the kitchen, her hands were steady, but her mind was racing. This wasn't just cruelty. This was fear slipping through the cracks. That night, Rachel didn't go home. She went to a public records office the next morning instead. She requested old corporate filings connected to shell organizations tied loosely to the Ashford Foundation. Most clerks didn't question her. She looked harmless, exhausted, ordinary. By the third file, she found it. A discontinued subsidiary, quietly dissolved, no press release, no closure statement, but attached to it, an internal report flagged and sealed under legal resolution. Rachel couldn't access the full contents, but the summary was enough. Workplace intimidation, financial coercion, forced silence agreements, and one key phrase that made her stomach turn, direct involvement of senior family member. Rachel sat back slowly. Victoria Ashford hadn't just ruined people socially. She had destroyed careers, lives, futures. And she had done it methodically, hiding behind her husband's power and the illusion of elegance. Back at the Golden Rose, Rachel watched Victoria differently now. Every insult sounded rehearsed. Every smile felt strategic. Victoria wasn't impulsive. She was practiced. She had been doing this for years because no one had ever stopped her. Until now. The moment came sooner than Rachel expected. Another Friday, another full house. Another nervous young server, this time a single mother named Anna, spilled a drop of sauce on the edge of Victoria's plate. Barely visible. Victoria stood up slowly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. The entire restaurant froze. "Do you think this is acceptable?" Victoria said, her voice carrying across the room. Anna's face crumpled. I'm sorry. I'll replace it immediately." Victoria raised her hand. "No, I want her fired. Now." The manager hesitated, just for a second. That second was enough. Rachel stepped forward again, calm as ever. "If you fire her," she said softly, "you'll need to explain why." Victoria turned, eyes narrowing. "Excuse me?" "Because this restaurant has cameras," Rachel continued, "and witnesses, and labor laws, and patterns." She met Victoria's gaze evenly, and patterns tend to attract attention. Silence. For the first time, Victoria Ashford looked unsettled. Lawrence shifted uncomfortably beside her. The manager froze, unsure which way to move. Victoria forced a smile. "Are you threatening me?" "No," Rachel replied gently. "I'm reminding you." The room felt different after that, charged, watchful. Victoria sat down slowly, her jaw tight. "Fix the plate," she snapped, "and get this woman away from me." Rachel obeyed, for now. But she knew something had changed. Victoria had finally seen her, and people like Victoria only reacted one way to that realization. They struck back. Victoria Ashford didn't return to the Golden Rose for 2 weeks after that night. The staff whispered about it like a storm that had passed but might return stronger. Some believed Rachel had crossed a line. Others secretly hoped she hadn't. Because for the first time in years, Victoria had been challenged, and she had backed down. But monsters never disappear quietly. On the third Friday, Victoria returned. She arrived later than usual, dressed in black this time, her diamonds sharper, her smile thinner. The restaurant fell into silence the moment she entered. Rachel noticed something immediately. Victoria wasn't here to dine. She was here to reclaim control. From the moment she sat down, the insults began. Not loud, not dramatic. Worse, surgical. She criticized the temperature, the spacing of the tables, the tone of a waiter's voice. She looked directly at Rachel every time she spoke, daring her to intervene again. Rachel didn't. She waited. When the main course arrived, Victoria lifted her fork, paused, and then let it fall deliberately onto the plate. "This smells wrong," she said coldly. "I think I've lost my appetite." She stood up. "I want the manager, and I want this waitress dismissed immediately." The manager rushed over, already sweating. Rachel could see the fear in his eyes, the same fear she'd seen in George's, in Anna's, in Thomas's years ago. This was how it always happened. Victoria turned toward the room. "I refuse to eat in a place that employs people who disrespect me." Cameras were recording, phones were out. This time Victoria wanted an audience. Rachel stepped forward, not loudly, not dramatically. She placed the plate down, folded her hands, and looked Victoria straight in the eyes. "Expose." The word was barely above a whisper, but it landed like a gunshot. Victoria froze. Not confusion, not anger. Fear. Lawrence turned sharply. "What did you say?" Rachel repeated it calmly. "Expose." The room held its breath. Victoria's lips parted slightly, then pressed together. Her eyes flicked, just once, to the side exit. The one she always used, the one she'd never needed to rush toward before. Rachel continued, her voice steady, almost kind. "I used to work in investigative journalism. I recognize patterns, disappearing subsidiaries, silent settlements, people fired and ruined for speaking up." Victoria's smile cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but it was there. "You don't know what you're talking about," Victoria said, but her voice lacked its usual certainty. Rachel nodded. "You're right. Not everything." She leaned in slightly, but enough. Lawrence stepped forward slowly. "Victoria, what is she talking about?" For the first time in 10 years, Victoria Ashford didn't speak. The silence said everything. Phones began recording in earnest now, not whispers. Focus. Rachel straightened. "You've built power by convincing everyone you're untouchable. But secrets don't disappear. They wait." She turned to the manager. "If I'm fired tonight, every document I've already submitted goes public tomorrow." Victoria's breath caught audibly. "What documents?" Lawrence demanded. Rachel met his eyes. "The kind that end legacies." Victoria grabbed her purse. "We're leaving," she snapped. But the room had shifted. People weren't afraid anymore. They were watching her. Victoria walked out faster than she'd ever entered. No applause, no insults behind her, just silence. 2 weeks later, the story broke. Former employees came forward. Lawsuits reopened. NDAs were challenged. The dissolved subsidiary reappeared in headlines. Victoria Ashford resigned from every board she sat on. Her name vanished from charities overnight. Lawrence issued a public apology. Victoria disappeared. Rachel didn't become famous. She didn't take interviews. She didn't need revenge. She kept her job at the Golden Rose. But things were different now. Managers listened. Staff stood taller. No one was fired on a whim again. And every Friday night at 8 SARS, the corner booth stayed empty, because power built on fear only lasts until someone says one word: enough.